tell us in a few words, what do you think is the role of international mediation today?
International mediation is intended to resolve deadly conflict, the kind of conflict we see now happening in Syria and also Israel-Palestine, which is not to say that international mediation will always be successful, but it's the way in which you can resolve in a non-violent fashion these extremely violent conflicts.
And how do we decide in which situations it is possible to mediate, in which situations it's just not worth even a try?
Well, it depends on who the we is. If the we is the United Nations, you're almost always giving it a try. And you may think it's hopeless. Syria is not ripe for resolution through negotiations and mediation. But if you are the United Nations, you keep making an effort. We also need to remember that at some point, these conflicts do end. And so mediation seems impossible before they end, and then when you look back, it seems inevitable. I come from South Africa, and the ending of apartheid seemed impossible through negotiations, but we did it.
Let me ask you how you think the Global South can fit into this debate on international mediation. Do you think that countries in the Global South can make a unique, different contribution? Do you think the Global South as a whole can make a different contribution, a unique contribution?
I must say I don't, because the Global South is so divergent. It's so heterogeneous, not homogeneous in our political values. And so the Global South includes Democrats and non-Democrats. I think it's perhaps easier to answer the question, can particular actors in the Global South play a more constructive role in mediation? And the answer would be yes. So could Brazil be more engaged in mediation? Yes. Could South Africa, which is already involved in Africa, be more involved in mediation? Yes. I think it's a good foreign policy posture for a medium power. Medium powers are not as threatening to parties in conflict as the big powers are. We don't mediate with muscle. We mediate with soft power. We are more interested in justice coming from the South, these kind of countries, than often the big power mediators. So I think often we are less threatening mediators and could be, more involved in this. It's also in our interests.
Do you think that a country like Brazil can only mediate in its own region, or do you think it can also make a contribution in other parts of the world, such as the Middle East?
It's a difficult question to answer because cultural fit, cultural dissonance as the opposite of cultural fit are relevant factors. And so the risk is that Brazil attempts to mediate in the Middle East and the Middle Eastern actors say, who are you? You don't know us and we don't know you. Certainly in Africa, the time for non-African states to mediate on our continent has long passed. So if Switzerland or Norway or Finland or Turkey tried to mediate in African countries, there'd be no traction. Those kind of countries would do better to support African states and African organizations that are mediating. And so that would be something for Brazil to think about. It's not only a question of who's the lead mediator, it's also a question of what support are you getting as the lead mediator from other states. And I think it's also worth thinking about coalitions of mediators. And so if it's Saudi Arabia or Egypt mediating between Fatah and Hamas, for example, could South Africa and Brazil and India provide the institutional, political, diplomatic support for the lead mediator? And it's unlikely today that a single country is the sole mediator. It may be the lead mediator, but it needs partners in that mediation.
And how do you think our institutions, research institutions, institutions that deal with conflict resolution in Brazil and South Africa can cooperate and coordinate their activities in order to move this agenda forward?
Yeah, look, we want to do similar things in our respective countries. We want to teach students at undergrad and postgrad level. We want to generate research. We want to encourage our governments and support our governments to do mediation and to do it better. And that could be through training or through research or through policy advice. And since we're doing similar things, there's a lot we can learn from each other. And if we're cooperating and collaborating, then there's the potential for synergy. So we cooperate as academics and produce better and more interesting research. We can cooperate on teaching, and that's because we learn from each other's experience. I think we can also facilitate cooperation between our governments. Sometimes it's helpful for non-governmental organizations to take the first step and organize forums for our governments to talk to each other and improve their partnership on mediation.
And finally, Laurie, I'm very happy that you were here, but I'm also very happy that you will be here next year. So could you say a few words about your perspective on the GSUM Winter School next year?
Well, I must tell you first, I'm very sorry to have missed the Rio Marathon, which was run in the morning I arrived, and I had just got off a plane. So the timing needs to be improved for next year. It's a great bunch of students. The energy is high. They are seriously engaged with these issues. It's different sometimes. It's different from what sometimes undergrad courses are, where students have, chosen a whole lot of subjects and they're not sitting there wondering why they chose those subjects and they're not really connecting. Whereas here it's a winter school and people volunteer and they're interested. They're doing the readings. They're engaged in the class. I think it's great that you have students from all around the world, and the more diverse the better, because we really do learn an enormous amount from each other's experiences. We had, for example, a student from China whose cultural and political experience and thinking is completely different from many of the rest of us. And so his questions are challenging. They challenge assumptions that you take for granted. GSUM itself is supportive. The students are working hard, so maybe they need a little more light relief. But I think it's a course that's really worth attending.
Thank you very much.